Hello, and thank you for joining Premier Group Insurance Commercial Lines Production School curriculum. We hope you enjoy the next bunch of classes as they will help you learn the basics of developing a thriving and profitable commercial lines practice. I always like to start one of these programs by reading our mission statement or our commercial lines mission statement to anybody who's participating. Our mission is simply to provide training, guidance, and business consulting along with strategic carrier access to support you as the agent's development of a thriving and profitable commercial lines insurance practice. So everything that we do, from educational materials to carrier relationships and new appointments, is related to this overall goal of helping you become the most successful agent that you can possibly be in writing commercial lines insurance. So my name is Matt Genova. I'm the Director of Commercial Lines at Premier Group Insurance. I have been in the insurance business for over 15 years. I've held a variety of different roles, including being a producer responsible for sales and generating new accounts. I've overseen service teams. I've seen operational details at agencies. And so this is something that is a part of my nature. This is actually my third career. I've, like many of you, probably did something else before getting into insurance. I worked in business-to-business sales out of college, and I also worked in real estate for a few years, and then eventually became an insurance producer and grew in my career outside of that. So my story is not unlike many of yours. Originally from Massachusetts, however, I did come out to school to go to the University of Colorado, so I've always had Colorado in my heart, and went back to Massachusetts for a number of years where I obtained my Master's of Business at the University of Massachusetts. But I did come back to Colorado again in 2015 because this is where I wanted to come and raise my family. And you see my beautiful wife, Katie, as well as my daughter, Anna, and my son, James, in this photo. I've been with Premier Group Insurance since January of 2021. And I always like to start our relationship off with a little statement of why I do what I do. I'm passionate about helping agents become the most successful versions of themselves that they can be. Over the years, I've had a lot of experience writing commercial insurance policies, servicing commercial insurance policies, and developing a very large and profitable commercial book. I now feel like it's my opportunity to help others who are learning this side of the business become what they can, the best versions of themselves they can be, and realize their professional and financial goals through development of a commercial insurance book. So that's why I've developed these classes. That's why I joined Premier Group Insurance, and I'm excited that you've chosen to spend some time with me, even though it's recorded video, over the next few weeks to learn some commercial insurance basics. So what to expect? We're going to have 8 learning sessions, including today. And what we're really focusing on is what I consider a holistic approach to building a commercial insurance practice. So we're going to talk about, business development strategies, so pipeline and sales. We'll talk about retention and service. We're also going to talk a lot about becoming a total account solution. So how do we write all lines of business? How do we maximize our carrier relationships? And I'll get into this a little bit more here in a slide or two. However, one thing I really want you to understand is we are not going to really cover too much about coverage. We have other trainings on our learning management system, the Premier Learning Center, to help you with coverage training, and I encourage you to view those so that you get a better understanding of what's covered and what's not covered by certain lines of business and policies. There will also be some recommended in-agency activities, so opportunities for you to take what we are talking about on these presentations and put it to work within your own agency, and so we'll talk a little bit about what that looks like. I'll also give you some supporting documents and files that are specific to commercial lines that should help you in the development of your practice as well. Ultimately, I'm hoping to give you the tools, but more importantly, the approach for long-term success. So again, let's talk a little bit about these learning sessions. Here's all 8. We're going to start with this welcome. It's going to be sort of an introduction to commercial lines. We're going to talk about the hard market as well as the mindset and the strategy of a commercial lines insurance advisor. We're going to dive then into forecasting and pipeline development, straight into sales, and then afterwards into servicing and retention. So this is sort of the first half of the program is what is the commercial insurance advisor? How do they build the pipeline? How do they negotiate the sales process? And how do they service and retain those accounts? But moving on from there, there's a whole lot more to developing a commercial lines practice. So we are looking at becoming that total account solution. So we'll talk about some ancillary lines of business, things like cyber, management liability like directors and officers, as well as employment practices liability and other sort of supporting lines of business that we want to capture when we write the total account. We're going to spend a good amount of time talking about carrier relationships, how to foster good carrier relationships, develop great relationships with your underwriters and your marketing reps. And we're going to talk about how that really benefits you from a profitability and direct revenue to the agency perspective. So we have a whole class devoted to that. It's one of my most exciting classes. Lastly, we'll talk a little bit about agency operations and then COI development. And COI in this instance doesn't stand for Certificate of Insurance. It actually stands for Centers of Influence. So there are some very sort of strong ways for you to build a really good referral network for your business. So excited to talk to you about that. And then in our last session, I'm kind of just going to encapsulate it, bring it all together for you in one sort of review. And so, like I said, you can take these over time. You could knock them all out in a day. We do have them all on the learning management system, so it's up to you. But just know that this is sort of the approach of what we're going to be talking about over the next 8 sessions. Within your agency, there'll be some opportunities for you to take some of the tools that we're giving to you and put them to work. So we will give you a forecasting tool, which can be great for your pipeline development and to help you set goals, both for sales, but also for activity. What do you need to do to help you achieve those sales goals and those premium and revenue projections? We're going to talk about selection of target industries, right? So what businesses should I focus on in my prospecting efforts, and how do I identify and find those targeted businesses? We also expect you to prospect during this process. So don't be afraid to make a few phone calls. There's nothing wrong with somebody telling you no thank you, but we do ask you to start to be active in generating some opportunities for you to present insurance solutions for new clients. We will talk about a book review. So let's look, if you are an existing agent and you do have some commercial insurance, we might be able to look at your book to understand the carrier mix, the line of business mix, and maybe identify some rounding opportunities or other business development opportunities for you, which would be low-hanging fruit through existing relationships that you currently have. We'll ask you over time to build a claims emergency kit. This is part of retention. What you'll want to do is basically have a toolkit that you can give to all of your insureds about what to do when they experience, say, a property claim or something else goes wrong and they need support. And then there's also additional studies. So like I had mentioned before, we do have coverage training on our Premier Learning Center. We have service trainings on our Premier Learning Center. And then outside of Premier Group Insurance, there's a whole host of wonderful educational resources for you, whether it's through our carriers or even some third-party schools that we can connect you with that can just enhance your understanding of both commercial coverage as well as the commercial sales and servicing processes. I'd like to take a moment now to step back and talk about coverage in commercial lines. Sometimes I hear agents say it's very complicated to write commercial lines, and in some cases that may be true, but in most cases it's really not. Commercial lines policies, are actually built exactly the same way as the personal lines policies that you're very familiar with dealing with. So every commercial lines policy is just going to have a declarations page, which is going to tell you, who the carrier is, the effective dates, the premium. It's going to tell you what coverage is in place at what limits and what deductibles there are. And it's going to list all of the endorsements that are attached to that policy. There's going to be insuring agreements. So it's going to tell you, just a document that's going to say, here's what we're going to cover you for. And then attached after that will be the exclusions, what we're not going to cover you for. And then there'll be conditions. So what each party must do to satisfy the conditions of the policy in certain circumstances. And then after that, there will be all the endorsements that are attached to the policies. And some of these endorsements can add coverage. Some of these endorsements can exclude coverage. Some of these endorsements can limit coverage. So it's good to understand those endorsements and read through those as well. Most commercial lines policies are going to be based on ISO forms. And then each individual carrier might add their carrier-specific endorsements to them, and that functions just like personal lines. So once you understand an ISO business owner's policy form, you're going to understand an ISO business policy form across almost all the carriers. And the same thing goes for general liability, commercial property, business auto. All of those things are going to be standardized on an ISO form for the most part. We do encourage you to read those policies so you can get familiar with what is covered by an ISO form and what is not. And then really, once you know what's covered by an ISO form and what's not, the only thing you really need to do is read the exclusions and the endorsements to understand what might be specific to the coverage that's being offered by that carrier in this specific circumstance. And like I mentioned before, we do have some excellent third-party schools and actually some free resources through some of our carriers for learning commercial lines coverage. And that's always really good to do to sort of round out and enhance your understanding and knowledge. But the best way to learn coverage, candidly, is to get at bats. You're going to learn through opportunities where you're going to work with underwriters who are going to present policies to you that you will read, and then you will understand better how commercial insurance is built. And so the more opportunities you get, I know this is very simple to think about, but the more opportunities you get, the better equipped you're going to be to understand and learn the commercial insurance business. So moving forward, I want to talk just briefly about the professional commercial insurance advisor. It's important to start to think of yourself less as an agent or a quoting machine, and more as an advisor. And this is the branching out in the separation between what I envision personal lines to be quite a bit and commercial lines. In personal lines, most of the transactions are processed very quickly. There's a limited amount of information that needs to be gathered, and it's somewhat easy using multi-rating softwares to get quotes. But commercial lines is a little bit more in depth in that, our clients are not necessarily always looking for the lowest premiums, but because their businesses are complex and it's because it's their livelihood, they're really looking for a trusted advisor, somebody who understands their risks that the business faces, as well as can provide solutions and recommendations on how to mitigate or eliminate that risk so that that business can propagate into the future. So the characteristics of an advisor, when you start to think about yourself as an advisor, you want to envision yourself as being that trusted partner of the business client. Somebody who's knowledgeable not only on products and the solutions that your carriers offer, but also on the exposures that that industry faces. Okay, we want to be a risk management consultant and not necessarily somebody who just sells an insurance policy. So we want to help that client understand the full scope of the risk the business faces and then consult with them. And in some cases, insurance isn't always the best way to mitigate or eliminate a risk. Understand the insurance marketplace trends. We're currently in a hard market, which we'll talk about in a second. But the insurance business fluctuates over time and evolves over time, and so you need to stay up you have to stay up on that and be able to explain what's going on in the insurance business to your business owner clients. You're going to be somebody who's continually investing in education, sharpening the sword, so that you can always be on top of what's new in the insurance business, any updates or changes to your carrier offerings and anything else like that, or learning additional lines of coverage and becoming a more well-rounded expert in various ways. And then lastly, you really want to be somebody who builds an intentional and profitable book. And what I mean by that is you don't necessarily want to be willy-nilly and write everything that comes to you. You want to be thoughtful about the customers that you're working with. You want to have clients who value you as an advisor and not as somebody who's just going to provide them a policy at the lowest premium. And you want to work with industries that you have solutions for. And also with carriers that are going to provide you those solutions and pay you good commissions. And that's where we lead to a profitable book. So we want to work with clients and with carriers that are easier to do business with than more difficult to do business with, and that pay us appropriately for our efforts so that we're maximizing the revenue return for our efforts. From a tactical perspective, the commercial insurance advisor is committed to prospecting. So the most successful commercial insurance advisors who I've ever interacted with in the insurance business over my 15 years, the ones who make the most money, who have the most clients, that have the largest clients, are the ones who get up early in the morning and the first thing they do every day is they figure out who they're going to contact to try to uncover their next opportunity. They're committed to that process, to prospecting. And that's why they've achieved the success that they have. It hasn't been by mistake. It hasn't been by luck. They've committed to the process and they do it daily, even when they are as successful as they are. Secondly, the commercial advisor is dedicated to underwriting and the process. So they are committed to gathering all the information that the carrier underwriter needs in order to present a quote. And they are also not interested in shortcutting any processes. So, they are understanding of the timeframes that their client is working under, that their underwriter is working under, and they find a happy medium so that the client gets what they need and the underwriter gets what they need and everything happens in the proper timeframes and that the proper information is shared and that process is stewarded well. And they're an advocate for both the client and the carrier. So it's important to remember that as insurance advisors, specifically in the independent world, we are the sales engine for the carrier, which means that we represent the carrier first. And so while a lot of times it feels like we work for our clients, we actually work for our carriers first. It's a little bit of a dual agency perspective, but we need to remember that we want to protect our carriers first, and then we want to solve solutions for our insureds. The commercial insurance advisor is committed to clear communication, takes time to explain exposures as well as coverages, and all the other solutions that may be involved to help your client mitigate the risks that their business faces. And then lastly, kind of as I had mentioned above, the commercial insurance advisor is discerning of the opportunities. So they have a mission of how they're going to build their practice. They have a focus and a direction, and they don't want to be derailed by things that come out of the blue that divert their attention from being successful in developing their practice. So they kind of constantly ask themselves, does this opportunity fulfill my mission? Is it something that I know how to write? Do I have an underwriter who I can work with to place this business? And if it doesn't sort of check those boxes, the professional commercial advisor is very confident in telling a client that they may not be the proper fit for that. And we'll talk a little bit more about why that makes sense in a minute. So we'll talk now a little bit about how commercial lines is different than personal lines, which we've touched on, but now we're going to go in a little bit more detail. So the first thing that we have to think about with the difference between personal and commercial is that the overarching risk profile of a personal lines client is fairly uniform. It's a home, it's an auto, maybe it's a rental property. They have automobiles. And every carrier who writes personal insurance to some degree or another will raise their hand and say, yeah, we'll take a bid at the home and the auto. So it's the characteristics of those opportunities that change the pricing and the eligibility for underwriting. So maybe it's the size of the home, where it's located, what it's made of, what are the interior finishings. For auto, it might be the types of vehicles, the ages of the drivers, and then of course you get into the insurance experience. If there's been losses, that can impact things. But on the whole, every carrier who writes personal insurance is in the business of writing home and auto insurance for the most part. Commercial insurance is different in that the risk profiles and exposures of different businesses are extraordinarily varied. The idea that a bakery faces a different exposure set than a manufacturing plant or a dentist's office or a commercial contractor seems apparent at first, but ultimately what it means is that there's a different set of underwriting criteria that you need to understand in order to be able to effectively write that business. And additionally, not all carriers want to write all different types of business insurance. So you might have a carrier who says, I'm interested in writing commercial contractors, but I'm not so interested in writing manufacturing. You might have an insurance carrier who says, I don't want to write contractors, but I'm super interested in writing, office exposures, things like insurance businesses or dental offices or real estate offices or those types of things. And so it becomes apparent very quickly in commercial lines that we must have a deeper understanding of the risks that our insureds face in different industries and a better understanding of our carrier offerings and what our carriers want to write. And so understanding those, you'll hear this term a lot, the appetites that carriers have for writing new business. Okay? So we'll also need to understand the specific products and solutions that are tailored to meet the risks of those businesses. So we'll have to say, hey, if I'm going to write a manufacturing plan, I need to understand the lines of business and the specific types of endorsements that I need to add to an ISO policy that fit the manufacturing business. And then outside of an insurance solution, we might actually even need to understand risk management strategies to help that business be even safer so that they don't have losses or even uncovered losses. The second thing is that underwriting and quoting can take time, so don't shortcut the process. We just talked about this a minute ago with the mindset of the commercial insurance advisor. You need to gather information from your insureds. Sometimes this involves gathering basic business information, and sometimes it involves gathering some industry-specific information. You need to take the time to gather that information. And additionally, you also need to get information on their claims history. A lot of times in personal insurance, the carrier portals will allow us to sort of click a button and run a report either on an MVR or a clue report to get property losses. It doesn't work that way in commercial lines. Our carriers depend on us as agents to gather information on prior losses. Typically, those are reported on what are called loss history reports, or you might hear the term loss runs, that the insured can get from their prior carrier. You also need to understand and value your underwriting partner. So we want to make sure that we are submitting opportunities to the carriers that are within their appetites. We are providing the information that the underwriter needs in order to adequately judge eligibility and pricing. And we need to make sure that we are sending them a reasonable amount of opportunities and winning a certain amount of business with that carrier. Because as different in personal lines, where a lot of the business is transacted electronically, in commercial lines, much of the business is transacted personally with an individual underwriter at least reviewing a submission and approving it, if not fully underwriting it from cradle to grave. And then you want to manage control through setting expectations with both your client and the underwriter. And we'll talk a lot more about this in detail. I'm just giving you a 30,000-foot level now. But the big opportunity is that the greater exposure in commercial lines often means opportunity. You can get more lines of coverage per account. You are able to sell advisory services, which is value. That's not premium. That's a way for you to differentiate yourself from the competition, which is to say, here's the service and the advisory things that I will do for you as a client. There are higher premiums in commercial lines, and there's long-term account growth. So typically a business that is successful grows over time, which means they add employees, they add vehicles, they sell more widgets, they may buy more property, and all of those things means that the account grows over time if you can maintain it. And so that also leads to increased retention, client loyalty, and you can get referrals very easily in the commercial line space once you've sort of carved out your niche. So a lot of ways commercial is different. We talked about some of the ways it's the same, specifically on the way the policies are built, but these are some ways that commercial is different. So let's talk a little bit about the hard market that we're experiencing right now. It is, as I'm recording this, July of 2023. Oftentimes we hear hear people referring to this market as the hardest market in a generation. It's very true. And while we're experiencing it more acutely on the personal line side, it's certainly also a hard market on the commercial insurance side. So what does that mean? Commercial lines hard market, or hard market in general, means essentially that the marketplace is unfavorable to buyers. there are typically higher premiums as carriers are trying to get more rate. There is certainly tighter underwriting, which means the availability of coverage to the insurance buyer is going to be more limited. And then lastly, there's a lack of capacity. So the amount of insurance that a carrier wants to offer as a whole is decreasing. So the opportunity to find insurance is even shrinking right now. And that is certainly something a lot of agents are experiencing on the personal line side. We also are experiencing on the commercial line side to some degree. So what's driving this hard market? Number one thing we can think of is cat losses. So increasing unstable weather across the United States and even globally is leading to more hurricanes and fires and hailstorms and flooding. And those are catastrophic losses that are increasing over time. There's social inflation. This is what is termed sort of legal, jurisdictional, legal settlement laws, which allow sort of balloon liability payments. And that's affecting the availability of liability insurance and the cost of liability insurance for commercial insurers. And then the cost of reinsurance, which is specifically related to property payouts via cat losses and social inflation on the liability side. There's also been inconsistent underwriting profits. So because of the amount of losses that the carriers have been experiencing over the last number of years, they have not been making as much money from an underwriting perspective, which means that they now need to tighten up or raise premiums. As I'm recording, this is July 2023, we have seen a little bit of a market rebound from a securities perspective, so stocks and bonds. Our insurance carriers do generate a lot of revenue via investment income, but over the last number of years, there has been some variability in the returns in the securities and bonds markets. And so the insurers haven't been able to count on that income essentially as much as they used to be able to. And so that's also driving some instability in what's leading to the hard market. And then lastly, there's economic concerns. Labor shortage, supply chain issues, inflation is a big deal as of the time of this recording. And so all of those economic concerns also lend an air of instability or hardship to the insurers, and that's what's driving the hard market. So how does your insured control costs in a hard market? Well, first thing you might think of is that, well, they just look at shopping their insurance to trying to find a lower rate. But in the hard market, that's becoming actually more and more difficult as less insurers are offering quotes. And if they are offering quotes, they're going to be at higher and higher premiums. So with all things being equal, a lot of insureds are staying put, but there are ways they can manage their costs. And this is where you as an advisor can really shine and add value. The number one thing that an insured can do is that they can manage their risk internally, so they can create some risk management strategies to prevent losses and implement them. So thinking critically about how to prevent property loss, how to prevent bodily injury losses, how to prevent auto losses. All of those things will help control insurance costs. Things like telematics, things like daily safety meetings, and all of the rest of those things. That also leads to loss control and loss management. So when there are losses, we want to try to mitigate them and lessen them. So what kind of measures are in place at your manufacturing company for when that water bursts, when that water pipe bursts, to control the damage that the water burst has an effect on. And what I mean by that is there are ways to maybe implement a water shutoff device at the water main that measures the regular flow of water through the manufacturing plant. And when it recognizes the abnormality, it can automatically shut off the water so that there's not a lot of damage that takes place, or that at least the amount of damage is mitigated. And then lastly, they can secure the right coverage. So we can look at, do they have the right coverage in place? Do they have the right limits in place? And then what are they choosing as their deductibles, right? So can they lessen the premium on their insurance by choosing a higher deductible if they have the cash reserves in order to pay off that deductible in the event of a claim? Ultimately, I see a hard market, however, as opportunity. And the reason why is it gives you a chance to connect with buyers who are frustrated with premium increases. Okay, so these are buyers who are feeling the pain, and they might want to talk to a new voice about things they can do to better manage their insurance and risk management plans. They may perceive a lack of value in their current relationship with their current broker, which will give you an opportunity to get in the door. If that agent isn't providing the valuable resources that they're hoping for. They may need the guidance on risk management that we talked about earlier. And they also, and this is key, may lack understanding of their current coverage. So they may have always bought insurance because they felt like they had to, but they never really understood what they're buying or what it covers. And this is a really great opportunity for you to say, here's what you have. And it's also an opportunity for you to uncover what they may not have or what they may need. There's nothing that can help an agent win an account better, even at a higher premium, by showing an insured a coverage that they need that their current broker didn't advise them to buy. This is a great opportunity also for you to educate your clients and prospects. Talk to them about the hard market, what is causing it, as we just talked about, the implications, and where it's going, and becoming an industry sort of trends expert and being able to convey that information to your clients can add value. Most business owners want to understand these things, and they just need somebody to help them, at least at a high level, understand what's going on. We want to educate the clients on coverage solutions and also the loss mitigation and risk retention strategies that we've talked about quite a bit. But most keyly, it allows you to sell on features other than price. So you can come in, you can connect with that buyer who's frustrated, and all of a sudden you can start to talk to them about the things that you can do that their current agent isn't doing. And that's a huge selling feature because we're still not talking about price. We can also showcase the services that our carriers offer. Our carriers, and we'll talk about this a lot more in the carrier relationship presentation, have a wealth of resources to support you as an agent, but also your clients in helping them run a safer business and one that results in lower claims and lower prices for them. And so we can showcase those things that the carriers do. And then again, we've talked about emphasize coverage and risk management. So a lot of good stuff here for you in the hard market if you're willing to prospect and make the calls. So 2 good questions that we'll kind of end on here, which is how does the successful advisor see themselves and what does the successful advisor value? So we'll start with the first question. And this is really a question of mindset. So the mindset of a commercial producer or commercial advisor, number one, is becoming a hunter or a harvester as opposed to a gatherer. And I want to talk about this from a targeted approach. A hunter goes out into the wilderness and takes a specific tool to bring down a specific type of game. So, if you're going to go after elk, you're going to need a rifle of a certain caliber or a bow of a certain caliber. If you're going after rabbit, you're going to need something that fits what you're hunting. And so it's a very specific hunt in that you have a specific tool and you're chasing a specific prey. Harvesting in a lot of ways is very similar in that you might plant certain seeds in certain conditions to reap certain types of crops. So we wouldn't, take a handful of, 50 different seeds, put them all in the same garden and hope that they would all succeed in the same environment. What we want is specific seeds that we know will grow and that will yield specific crops for us over time. And so gathering is a little different. Gathering is sort of, hey, I'm going to walk out into the woods and I'm going to pick up anything that I think looks like it could feed me. Okay. And so gathering, might be able to feed you for a while. But you got to be a little bit careful. You don't want to pick the berries that are going to make you sick, keeping along with this analogy. But it's also a way that you don't know what you're going to get. You never know what day you're going to get the food that you need to provide sustenance for you. And so that's why most commercial lines advisors have that hunter-harvester mindset as opposed to the gatherer mindset. They also want to focus on quality over volume. So they're okay saying, I'll pass on this opportunity because it doesn't fit the quality. Maybe the insured has unrealistic expectations, or the risk itself will be difficult to place. I don't necessarily have the right carrier mix to be able to place that risk. And so they'll wait to get a good opportunity as opposed to wasting their time or investing their time on a low value opportunity. They have high expectations of themselves, so they invest in themselves, they educate themselves, they learn. They have high expectations of their clients. So that client must provide me the information that I'm asking for, and that's part of our agreement or our contract between us. They have high expectations of their carriers. So if you develop a good relationship with your carrier, our expectation is that that carrier will provide us the solutions that we need to be successful in the marketplace. And so, if all three of those are in alignment, then you have a wonderful working process. And so that's why you have high expectations over them. The advisor listens more than they talk. It's impossible to create value by presenting your solutions before you can learn about the problems that the insured is having. So you must listen to their stories, and you must hear and take cues from them so that you can be successful, as opposed to just showing them how you're going to solve their problem right away. They value the relationship over the sale. I know many commercial insurance advisors who have passed on opportunities because the time isn't right, but then that opportunity may come back to them over time. But they're also looking at saying to somebody, look, we're going to go through this process and build a relationship first. And at the end of it, we hope that you buy from us. But if you don't, that's okay. We're still going to generate some good relationship and maybe even some connections and some referrals out of that. So the commercial advisor, in addition, also values and protects their time and the time of others, which is extremely important, which is why you don't want to go down a rabbit hole chasing an account that may or may not be a high value account for you. And then they also have a commitment to improvement. So like I said, high expectations of yourselves, commitment to improvement means staying up to the latest in product knowledge, staying up to the latest in industry knowledge, and then procedural, like how are you doing things? Can you kind of consistently make little tweaks to make your processes a little better for yourselves, for your agency, for your insureds, for your carriers, whatever it might be. The commercial insurance advisor is fair. We're understanding of everybody, whether it's the carrier, whether it's the insured. But we're also demanding. And I want to make that clear. When you talk about high expectations, that means that you're demanding of people. You're demanding of yourself, you're demanding of your insureds, and you're demanding of your carriers to make sure that everybody's performing and you hold people accountable. And that just keeps everybody in line and with a strong understanding of where we are at any given time within that three-pronged relationship. And then lastly, they're fearless and they're very confident. So the commercial insurance advisor is not afraid of rejection. They are not afraid of being told no by a carrier, being told no by an insured. And they are very confident that if they set their plan and they execute their mission, they will be successful in the long run. And so they are committed to process first, and they are very skilled at sort of staying on task. Okay, so what are our next steps? So we're going to wrap here in the next couple of minutes. There are some links that accompany this video in the Learning Management System, the Premier Learning Center. One of them includes sort of an analysis for you. So I do encourage you to take what I call a SWOT analysis, which is a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis for your commercial lines practice. Take a minute, if you have written some commercial insurance, to review your book of business for any opportunities. Set aside some time. Develop a business plan. Don't be afraid to reach out to your commercial lines business consultant to discuss that business plan and maybe tweak it or execute or whatever you're going to do. Set aside some time for prospecting. Nobody's going to be successful, and I say that 100%. That nobody who's listening to this will be successful if they don't prospect. And prospecting isn't necessarily putting an ad in the newspaper. Prospecting is finding businesses within your identified targeted industries and going out and setting opportunities with them. So making phone calls, dropping by their offices, sending them letters, whatever it might be you need to prospect. Review those core coverage classes that are in the Premier Learning Center, and review the servicing for commercial lines classes that are also in the Premier Learning Center. So that concludes our first presentation in the Commercial Lines Production School. I look forward for you to join presentation number 2, which is focused on forecasting and pipeline development. So